Hello, I'm Chief Political Correspondent Rachael Burford.
I'm Political Editor Nicholas Cecil.
And welcome back to A Week's a Long Time in Westminster.
It's just us two today as Jit is away on holiday this week.
Good for him.
But what a week it's been in politics.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title.
It is my great honor to have Joe's endorsement in this race.
You sure do.
And it is my intention to go out and earn this nomination and to win.
Let's first head to America, where Kamala Harris has really electrified the US presidential race. She's delivered a surprisingly strong performance as she's grabbed the Democratic nomination. It's really set Washington alive. Back in Westminster, there are no fireworks on the right of politics. We've got the Tory leadership contest, which is underway, and they really do need to pick a good leader to avoid 10 years in the political wilderness. Certainly, looking across the pond, expectations about Kamala Harris were so low, fairly or unfairly, but she's really made an impact this week.
Yeah, I think that's helped quite a bit by her opponent. We should say she has not been officially selected as the Democratic nominee yet. But obviously today, just before we started recording here, she got the backing from Obama. So it's pretty much nailed on that she will be the Democratic presidential candidate. And yeah, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because she is, she's been vice president for all this time, but we know quite little about her. And people have said she's, a bit cringe, maybe. She is not great on certain topics, but she does appear to be a bit of a breath of fresh air compared to Trump. Before, it was he felt like the younger, sprightlier candidate compared to Joe Biden. But now he hasn't got that going for him.
And I think this really could be one of her strengths, because elections are so much about who owns the future. And can Trump own the future at the age of 78 compared to Harris at 59? And certainly if you saw when she got the endorsement from Obama, she did that in a phone call, which was obviously a stunt.
Kamala!
Hello. Hi.
Hey there!
Oh, hi, you're both together. Oh, it's good to hear you both.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
In it, she thanked them and said, and we could have some fun. And This could really be a key weapon, because Trump doesn't do fun.
No, he doesn't. And she's really embraced sort of like youth culture, memes. She's doing the sort of Brat girl summer meme all over the place. Do you want to explain Brat, Nick?
I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, so how would you explain Brat, I suppose? It's kind of like a carefree party girl aesthetic, maybe, which kind of works for her. It wouldn't work for a lot of politicians, but, she is prone to the odd gaffe and saying something a little bit stupid, and that does kind of fit in with the whole Brat aesthetic, which comes from this British artist, actually, Charli XCX, who's released her 6th album called Brat. And it's kind of taken social media by storm. We've even had Sadiq Khan this week posting Brat memes and things. And she's kind of embraced that and started posting things on her Twitter and Instagram about it. So she's really going after the youth vote, I think, whereas Trump is seen as old and stuffy. Well,
that's very interesting, because there was, going back to some boring numbers here, there's a poll out which had a really, really startling figure in it. I thought that 30% of Americans say their country is not ready for a female president. And it's just mind-boggling. And certainly I was in Downing Street earlier this week, and if you walk up and down the stairs there, you see all the portraits of the cabinet over the years. And one really struck me, which was Margaret Thatcher's cabinet in 1989. And she's the only woman. And even then I thought, that was amazing. But to think that America still hasn't had a female president, and many people think that's still not possible, is even more striking.
It really is, yeah. They've never had a woman. And, when we think about Britain, Margaret Thatcher, whatever you think about her, she was leading the Conservative Party in the 70s. It's really striking statistics that you'd say 30% of Americans, which must include a lot of women, saying that, no, can't have a woman on the ticket. It's really strange. I think there is another interesting statistic as well from this election, that this will be the first American election since 1976 that hasn't had a Biden, Bush or Clinton on the ticket. Yeah, so 1980, obviously since then, there's always been a Biden, Bush or Clinton on the ticket. This will be the first one.
Looking ahead, so there's still around 3 months to go before November the 5th, election day. And some people are saying there's little time, but actually 3 months in politics is a long, long time. Certainly for Kamala Harris, she met the Israeli PM, Benjamin Netanyahu, and she's got a chance now to really impose herself on the world stage and on the American stage if she takes this opportunity. The one big moment will be the TV debate. How does she fare against Trump? And
she can't do worse than Biden did, I don't think.
No, and I think it'd be difficult for him because he can throw all kind of barbed attacks at Biden and no one really cares. But if he starts attacking a female candidate in a very unpleasant and aggressive manner, I think that could really turn people away from him.
Yes, I mean, obviously he was up against Hillary Clinton when he won, so he does have form for those kind of attacks. And I think her team will very much be watching those old debates and looking back and seeing, what they can do to counteract those.
And after the attempted assassination attempt against him, Donald Trump, he came out saying, I'm going to unite America. This lasted actually a bit more than 10 seconds, maybe 10 minutes or so. And now he's fresh back straight into the attacks. And this is what he said about Kamala.
So now we have a new victim to defeat. Lion Kamala Harris, Lion, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history.
And heading back across the Atlantic quickly, back at Westminster, the Tory leadership races got into gear, but still a pretty low gear.
Yes, the leadership race no one seems to be talking about. Yeah, we've got 4 candidates who have officially announced so far. So we've got ex-immigration minister Robert Jenrick, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly, Mel Stride, who was
Shadow Work and Pensions.
He
was Work and Pensions Secretary. Yeah.
And who's the fourth? We've got
Tom Tugendhat.
Tom Tugendhat, of course, yes, who was Security Minister. Yeah, so all men so far. We are expecting someone. We're expecting the likes of Priti Patel to stand up, possibly Suella Braverman as well. But yeah, it's going to be a long process.
And there's certainly no standout candidate at the moment. There's no one you think, well, it's probably him or her. It's there for anyone to win, I think. And the other thing is that we will only know on November the 2nd who's won 3 days before the US elections, which is bizarre timing. And some people have criticised this timetable, saying that actually you need a leader in place for the party conference. But I think it's more important for them to take their time and get the right person, because they've got a difficult task ahead of themselves to rebuild trust with the electorate. And some people are saying they should swing to the right to try and out-Farage. But I don't think you can out-Farage.
No, and also I think they're just forgetting that they lost a lot of votes to the Liberal Democrats and Labour as well. So, in fact, they lost more votes to the Lib Dems. So they should be really kind of possibly swinging to the centre ground as well. I just want to mention one thing. So Tom Tugendhat did some polling, or his team did some polling, about who would do a good job as Conservative leader. And Tom Tugendhat came out on top with a massive +1 approval rating. And he sort of tweeted this out. It's like, we need a leader who can win. And a lot of people were mentioning that +1 is not a great result for him. Priti Patel at the bottom of -35. Robert Jenrick in second place at -8. But yeah, I think the situation with the Tories at the moment is pretty dire. Right, let's go to a quick ad break.
Coming up, housing crisis in London, and are tax rises on their way within months, despite Labour's promises at the election. So welcome back. Keir Stamer has now been in number 10 for 3 weeks, and many of the Labour top team are still very much running on adrenaline. But before we break for the summer, let's try to fast forward to the autumn and see how things could shape out by then. Certainly, Starmer's still very much in his honeymoon. The voters are eager for change, eager for living standards to go up and so on. But how long will their patience actually last?
Well, yeah, I think every time you see a minister on the media at the moment, it's just, the line is, you'll never believe the crisis we've been left with. It's a bit of a bin fire out in government. And you've seen that sort of every day. They're going about prisons, talking about the NHS, Wes Streeting today, talking about the Care Quality Commission and how it's just not fit for purpose. So yes, it's very much, we have inherited something that is terrible, and we are really going to have to dig ourselves out of a hole here. So it's kind of, some people have suggested, paving the way for a Rachel Reeves autumn budget where they say, well, look, we had no idea how bad it was. We're going to need to raise a few taxes.
Well, this is one of the strongest messages we've had so far at the end of this week. So the Chancellor, she's actually been in Brazil, in Rio, but suddenly we hear that there's potentially a £20 billion black hole in the public finances. Now, Labour can claim to a certain extent that actually the Tories weren't honest about the state of the public finances and that left them a few poison chalices. But economists before the election were warning very, very loud and clear, including the Institute for Fiscal Studies, that neither party were being honest about how bad the public finances were and that tax rises would have to happen, or there'd have to be more borrowing, or public services would get even worse.
I think even before the election, Rachel Reeves admitted, I can't go in and say these sort of things because we have the Office of Budget Responsibility now, the OBR. That is their job, is basically to lay out what the public finances are like. But, they had to run this campaign. The only thing the Tories had against them was Labour rise. They raise taxes. They will raise your taxes. And that was really the only stick they had to beat Labour with. So they came out and said, no, we won't do that. We don't want to raise taxes on working people, which was Rachel Reeves's big line. And I think if we do see tax rises in her budget in the autumn, they will be focused on much richer people.
And I think this is the crucial point here, because if you say, I'm not going to raise taxes, even if you kind of qualify that to a certain extent, what the electorate here is, I'm not going to raise taxes. Then suddenly, if you suddenly start to raise them on a certain group of the population, if that group is too wide, then the message comes across that they said they wouldn't raise taxes, and suddenly they are doing so, and they've broken a key pledge. So Labour need to tread very, very carefully here.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, even if these taxes only really affect millionaires and private school parents, there will be a lot of column inches dedicated to them in certain in papers anyway, which may give the appearance that everyone's taxes are going up. But I think the problem is as well, prices aren't coming down. So even for normal people, even if their taxes don't go up, they're not going to be feeling any better off necessarily after a budget. So it's there's a lot of work for them to do.
And the other thing that the new government are banking on to get extra billions to pay for improved public services is major reforms, planning reforms,
Correct.
Housing reforms, a green economy and so on. And they've definitely hit the ground running, masses of energy, but reforms take time. And if we rewind to the early days of the Blair government, actually not that early days, if we look at summer of 1999, Blair caused a stir there when he spoke about the scars on his back as he tried to push through public sector reform. Yeah. So there's going to be no quick money, no quick fixes that will deliver this extra revenue that the government desperately wants to pay for better hospitals and schools.
Yeah, and planning reform is really at the centre of this. Anyone who sat through a local planning committee knows it is not easy to put up a load of houses, but that is what the government have to do, because the housing crisis really is at the centre of Britain's problems at the moment, economic problems, social problems. This week, we've written loads of housing stories this week. Kingston Council in southwest London, one of the sort of wealthier parts of the capital, they have hired out an entire four-star hotel, Kingston Lodge Hotel, for an entire year to house homeless families. And on the surface, that sounds great. Oh, you get to live in a four-star hotel for a year. But actually, you have a room. Hotels are for holidays. They're not for families to be living in. If you've got kids in school and things, it is not ideal to be living in a hotel. And that is the situation across the capital. Greenwich just signed off £5 million to pay for hotels for homeless families. It's happening in other boroughs too. And I think that is literally because Kingston Council said, we have no houses anymore. We don't have flats, we don't have council houses, but we need to give these people somewhere to live, particularly those with children. It's a huge problem, not just across the capital, but across the country now.
And this is going to be a key test of the government because Keir Stamer, Rachel Reeves, they all say they're willing to take tough decisions. We heard the same mantra from previous Tory administrations, But when it came, for example, over housing, when people said, oh, well, we want lots more housing, but it's not in my backyard, then the previous Conservative government retreated and they ditched their mandatory housing targets. Yeah. So the Labour now saying we could build the solar farms, we could build the offshore and onshore development to get green energy. But these decisions are controversial and they'll need the courage to see this through.
This government has also said they want to tackle leasehold, and some of those leaseholding fees scandals you see that have really come to a head after Grenfell. But the last Labour government also promised to tackle those, and every time it was just kicked down the road because it's hard to do. It's controversial with certain demographics of people. It's something that is going to need real political will and, people that don't mind being shouted at a bit to force through, and, a big proper plan. I think one of the interesting things that is going to hit next year is Labour confirmed during the general election campaign that they will put up stamp duty for first-time buyers. So at the moment it's £425,000. That's when stamp duty starts. They're going to bring it back down to £300,000. And that, I had a quick look on Rightmove before we started recording here, and there are 400-ish two-bedroom properties or more in the capital under £300,000, and most of those are either cash only because they've got short leases, they're in really dilapidated states, so that is really going to hit Londoners.
I think what Labour have got going for themselves is that Stamer has actually run an organisation previously, so he's actually delivered something. A lot of people in politics have just kind of written policy papers and so on and strategies, but to actually run a big organisation. So Stamer's number 10 now. He was Director of Public Prosecutions, so he ran the CPS. Now he needs to show he can deliver on what he's promised, and I think it could be testing times for the government in the autumn.
Indeed.
And that's A Week's a Long Time in Westminster.
A Week's a Long Time in Westminster will be taking a break for August while we're in recess, but we'll be back, along with Parliament, in September.
You'll still hear plenty from us on the Standard podcast, though, with all the big political stories you need to know.
For all the latest news, head to standard.co.uk or pick up a newspaper.
The Standard podcast will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Have a great weekend.